process.
I'll be on mute and hop on my portion.
All right. Well, it's a couple after 10, so we can go ahead and get started. So thanks everybody for joining us in for our monthly member check-in. We have a few updates for you all today, and then we want to kind of open up the floor. If you have questions about things as we go through it, feel free to unmute yourself, ask, or if you want to type anything into the chat box. Obviously, still tons of stuff going on in the world right now, so we want to just go through a few updates as it relates to COVID, some stuff we're working on around racial justice, some upcoming events, some resources for members, some political advocacy that we're working on, and then at the end, if there's time and interest, I'll do a quick demo of some resources. So we'll go ahead and get rolling in. So as it relates to COVID resources, we just want to remind folks that the National Office has tons of resources through their website at socialworkers.org. That includes anything from telehealth to legal to HIPAA to self-care resources there. We are continuing to host our bi-monthly clinical peer support groups on the first and third Friday of each month. That will be next Friday, will be our next one. So if folks are interested in joining in on that, next week's one will also coincide with our private practice group. So I know that they are looking to have a couple of side conversations, one around specifically we're seeing this influx of folks transitioning into private practice or having an interest of transitioning into private practice during the pandemic, which I think is an interesting outcome of everything we've seen. So they're talking about developing a series of trainings for folks who are looking to do that, as well as some additional trainings on how to incorporate new social workers into your staff. So especially if you're bringing in limited licenses into your clinical practice. But those meetings are open for free. And then the other two entities that I just want to make sure folks knew about were ASWB and Pearson View. So this is mostly going to impact folks who are limited license and that's nearing their testing phase. So at aswb.org, couple of things there. They all have the most up-to-date information about any testing changes as it relates to the pandemic, but they also have put together a really good list of state-by-state legal changes since the pandemic and how that impacts your license. So actually, I'll just open that up real quick so folks can see what that looks like. But we've gotten quite a bit of questions throughout the pandemic about if my client's in a different state, or if I got a request to see somebody in a different state, what do I need to do? Can I do that? What license do I need to have? And so what's really nice about ASWB is you can just go through and you can click whatever state, and it will tell you which executive orders or whatever particular rules have changed since the pandemic in that particular state. So before the pandemic, Michigan, you had to be licensed in the state your client was in. Post-pandemic, or at least during pandemic, it's much more flexible. And so this is a really handy guide that just walks through each state-by-state regulation change. The other piece is Pearson View. So this is going to be specifically for folks taking the test. So if any of you are supervising folks, Pearson View is the testing site. So we know that in March and into April, many of the sites were closed, just period.
This across here. Dwayne, you went out for just a moment after you started talking about Pearson View.
Oh, thanks, Algeria. I'm up in rural Michigan, so that may happen. If it does again, let me know, and I will get my phone and just switch over to that. Can you hear me, Algeria?
Yeah, you're perfectly fine.
Okay, okay, great. So Pearson View, they're going to be the folks who handle the testing location itself. So during March and April, they were out. There was no testing available, at least in Michigan, while most of the stay-at-home order was happening. But testing sites have been open, they've been running. Some of the specific locations have been full as they've kind of had to fill a backlog for those missing months. But at this point, we're seeing, at least in Michigan, that there are testing sites available, that there shouldn't be an issue for folks registering for their exam. And as we know from the Board of Social Work, they're now allowing until the end of June of next year for folks to get their exam in before they have to have all of their hours complete. So we're definitely pushing for folks who are limited license or those who are graduating, say in the fall or winter, to try to get their exam done before that June deadline, if at all possible. There also are quite a few national resources, free resources that are available to folks, and I just wanted to highlight these because I think a lot of times it's easy for them to get overlooked. NASW has a series of free webinars that include free CEs and all around COVID, so working with nursing home residents, ethical and legal considerations, telebehavioral health, and Medicare telehealth options. So if you're looking for some CEs and looking for some specific ones around COVID response, those are going to be great for you. Our national office also right now has been continually putting out letters or press releases or signing on to various documents related to COVID. They've reached out to ASWB. Some states have been much more impacted around the testing than Michigan has. We've been pretty lucky that things have run fairly smoothly past April. And then some other endorsements that I just wanted to make sure folks saw. And I think this is my last COVID update slide. So the other resources that is available to folks is NASW Assurance Services, the liability wing of NASW. They've been starting a series of trainings and videos as it relates to coronavirus and as it continues on. So they've had some good stuff around telehealth. This one here is about selecting technology providers, and I know we've talked about that, especially at the beginning of the pandemic. So what sort of online platforms are better or worse to use? These are free, so if you go to NASW Assurance's website, you can find those, as well as they have a whole bunch of other tips. During the pandemic, they also did open up free liability to retired social workers who had had a policy in the past but had come back and wanted to work during the pandemic. So I highly recommend checking them out if you need additional resources around liability or cyber liability right now. All right, so then as that transitions us into kind of the policy and advocacy space, I saw Jerry just stepped off for a second, and she is back.
All right. Hi, everybody. I just want to go over a few advocacy updates, just following up on what Dwayne mentioned around telehealth. There's Executive Order 2020-138. We've received many calls about telehealth, and this is just one to inform you about. This has allowed encouraging the use of telehealth services during COVID-19 to continue to take place. All healthcare providers are authorized and encouraged to use telehealth services when medically appropriate. We want to make note of number 7, which defines all healthcare providers, which includes social workers. This order was in effect, I believe, August 7th, and continues to remain in effect through the state of emergency and disaster right now. So we do not see this changing anytime soon, although like Dwayne mentioned, there's a lot of national advocacy to continue telehealth beyond the states of emergency. So going on to the next slide. The Consensus Revenue Estimating Conference took place on August 24th. It's a conference where the state decides how much money has come in from various different entities and workforces that, people have paid into. So that took place August 24th, and they realized that we're up from in May when we thought we were down a lot by $1.3 billion. We're up $1 billion for the school aid fund. There are projected revenues for the fiscal year 21 beginning in October 1st, but we're still looking at an overall $2.4 billion budget shortfall. So just to let you all know, we are closely just monitoring this, but right now we still are unclear because of the pandemic. So the Paycheck Protection Program and the economic impact payments and the pandemic underemployment insurance compensations were all factors that helped make the revenue a little higher for these moments, but still looking forwards. We are still unsure and unclear, and we'll know more. One positive thing was the state of Michigan reached its settlement over the Flint water crisis. So as you all know, this has been going on since 2014, and there was a $600 million settlement for the city of Flint. All right, on to the next slide. So I just wanted to bring up a few other points. The state of emergency and disaster declaration was extended. So this goes into the first slide around telehealth being extended as well. Right now, this executive order is in effect till September 4th, which depends. We'll see if that gets extended. If so, we'll continue to see many of the other executive orders extended as well. So let's keep an eye out for that. I think we're all hoping that COVID will be over soon, but we never know, right? Additionally, there were $65 million allocated from the governor's Education Emergency Relief Fund, and that took place August 19th. She announced this $65 million as a part of the CARES Act. And those dollars are going to go to Michigan school districts and higher education institutions and other education-related entities that have been most significantly impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. At least 50% of the school district's population, however, must be deemed economically disadvantaged. And the allocation of the funding will be determined by certain criteria, which includes special education needs. So that is a good thing for especially our students who are going back to school in person or online right now. So another update that came out today from MDHHS, which is very positive, is that Michigan low-income college students enrolled in either career and technical education programs can now apply for food assistance. And this is extended to individuals in the Perkins program. So college students in Michigan, they're basically now eligible for SNAP if they meet certain income requirements. This provides funding to 28 community colleges, 3 public universities, and then 1 tribal college to support the pathways to high wage and high skilled and in-demand careers that require less than a bachelor's degree. So that notice went out today. And so if you are looking to figure out where do these MDHHS notices come to, you can go to MDHHS's website and click on their news portion, which is at the bottom of the screen, and it'll talk about a lot of their releases, so you can get more information and details on those. Additionally, they announced that it was Black Breastfeeding Week, so that took place from Monday until the 31st, or the 25th through the 31st. They're doing a few campaigns around that and public information. Today there will be a webinar for folks in the Flint area, and that information is on their website as well. It takes place at 2 p.m. This campaign is because we know successful breastfeeding can protect babies against allergies and sickness and diseases, diabetes and cancer. And this is also an effort to support Black mothers and health disparities across the state of Michigan. So as it relates to you all who may have a private practice or provide some form of services where you're in the CHAMP system, MDHHS is going to be doing a CHAMPS 101 webinar series. I have a photo up there. If you can't see it, that's okay. I'll be sending out an email blast next week where you can see this in more details. But pretty much, you know, are you new to Medicaid? Are you a new Michigan Medicaid biller? or do you simply just need a chance refresher? They'll be doing a 6-week webinar series from September 2nd through October 7th, once a week. And as you can see, they'll go over various different topics. So if that's you, you may want to take a look at that and sign up for a refresher. I think especially given all the changes with COVID, it would be very helpful. Going forwards to more advocacy and policy updates. We've talked about this in a few of our other calls. We're working actively with legislators and social workers across the state to create legislation for a better form of community safety. And we've had a lot of conversations. Some of you were on our call earlier this week, and just from the comments and conversations we're hearing in Michigan, it seems as if social workers really want to be some form of responders and in the community, helping with deflection and diversion efforts. As it relates to racial justice, which Dwayne will talk more about here soon, NASW-Michigan staff, we've really been hitting the ground, sprinting with our national staff on racial justice initiatives. We are a part of a larger task force effort with multiple chapters, and we serve on the steering committee, the education, legislative, and messaging committees to really try to figure out how to dismantle racial issues and within the profession, association, and across the state and just across systems. So we're really proud to be a part of that and trying to work towards an anti-racist field.
Algeria, can I add something to that?
Sure.
One of the things that this group is wrestling with to address is our own personal biases around racism, all of the isms. And I'm realizing that social workers really need to address our own stuff before we can expect to change others, right? Or develop adequate programming. So I guess what I'm asking is, if you think about this and you come up with ideas about how NASW can help facilitate that in your area, I'd sure appreciate hearing that. And you can send me an email with any ideas you might have, because I think it's really critical, and it's really critical, I call it crucial conversation for our regions.
Mm-hmm. I also will say, I know we work closely with community mental health, as well as the Department of Health and Human Services. And they've put out a lot of resources lately, just about as well as our national office, about culturally responsive practices and what that means, and cultural competency and cultural humility. So I would just highly encourage folks to take a look at all of those forms of documents, and as well as provide us, like Max just mentioned, with feedback. We greatly appreciate that.
Do you also want to talk for a second about the NASW, so racial justice group that we're starting?
Dwayne, do you have that in your slide later? Or?
Yeah, I think that might be the next slide, or a couple slides from now. But yeah, so we'll talk about that.
Great.
So just kind of getting through some of the rest of the policy stuff. If you didn't see, NASW did endorse Joe Biden for president. NASW, both at the state and the national level, endorse candidates through our political action committee. So we invite members to be involved with that process. If you know of good folks, regardless of party, who you think that we should endorse or look at, please, if they're Michigan focused, send those over to Algeria. Our national political office, our political action committee, they endorse federal level candidates. So they look at Senate, House, President, those sort of things. I think we can probably all agree that it's a good thing that the conventions are done and we move past that. And so we just got to move on towards November at this point. NASW will be working on plenty of get out the vote efforts we've got a lot of candidates locally that we're going to support.
I'll say,
Algeria,
yeah,
Algeria can talk about this one.
I'll say one thing about MPACE. So typically MPACE meets monthly, and because there are going to be so many endorsements, right, we will be making some of those endorsements, just communicating via email. So if you'd like to be a part of that, please just reach out. I'll put you on the listserv. We'll review candidate endorsements and begin to have conversations. I know we have one of our members on who serves on the MPACE committee on the call. But additionally, we made a few endorsements before the primary, and a lot of these folks made it through the primary. Alicia Brabick, Matthew Stoll, Baba Koopa, Alex Garza. We have Eli Savitt, who was running for Washtenaw County prosecutor, Justin Hodge. So we're endorsing at the state level as well as local offices. We know prosecutor races are very important. We know judge races are very important. So we're trying to keep it a broad view. But if you know of some more folks, especially on the local level, who are social workers, please send them our way.
Yeah, I'm always surprised how many MSW and BSW level folks I happen to just like pop across. I was doing just a Google search of Michigan social workers yesterday, and there's always somebody that's running for something, whether or not they're practicing social work or licensed right now, but they have a social work background. And quite a few of the folks that we've endorsed are licensed and practicing too. But that's where we really also rely on you all as members to know you know your communities better than we do in a lot of senses. So if you know somebody good that's running, we want to get them in. Algeria, one of the questions that had come through in a past call, maybe it would just be helpful to just quickly talk about it. What is generally the process for us endorsing somebody?
I'm on mute. Yeah, great question. So we send candidates an MPACE questionnaire, or they'll reach out and say, we're interested in potentially being endorsed. They fill out a questionnaire. The questionnaire really asks about, one person asked, will NASW endorse Gary Peters? I believe our national office has endorsed Gary Peters as well as Dan Kilby. And they're looking at a couple other folks as well. But they'll fill out a questionnaire, and the questionnaire kind of asks them about where they on certain positions. It'll ask them about if they're in congruence with some of the social work values and what initiatives they've taken towards those. And based on their responses, but also based on the needs of those communities, the committee will take a look at all that information and decide how to endorse, who to endorse, and how to endorse, right? Our endorsements vary. Some races need a little bit more financial backing than others, and our MPACE committee makes that decision collectively. Sometimes it's an easy decision, sometimes those decisions are very hard, but this is an important election, so they've been great with making really critical decisions on candidates.
Yeah, and I just had scrolled over to the national PACE, and they have endorsed both Dan Kilby and Gary Peters. Yeah, and so one of the other things that at least MPACE looks at doing too is what's the level of endorsement, right? Do we do it? Is there money involved? Do we try to get out people to go and canvass or campaign, or is it really just like a visible vocal endorsement? And so depending on the race and kind of maybe how much additional support they need, I know that that's often something that we look at.
And MPACE does have a say in state level Congress individuals, so we'll get a response from our national office, and they'll say, why should we endorse Gary Peters? Why should we endorse Dan Kilby? And these are people that we work with closely on a state level, so we know those responses a little bit better. So that's how we endorse our Congress people as well.
Yeah, and Ken kind of had a follow-up, like, do we always endorse a social worker if they're running? And the answer to that is no, right? They have to be the right candidate for whatever race is. And so that's a simple answer. We would like it to be lots of social workers running, and we hope that they're always the right candidate, but that's not always true. All right. So moving on kind of from the political stuff into another really critical topic right now is kind of anti-racist practice. So NASW, as we've already talked about, has quite a lot of resources available on the national website, whether it's training materials or practice materials. There, our National Vice President of Ethics, Dawn Hobdy, recently put out a really good kind of statement from the national office, but also really recommended for folks to go and use the My NASW member community to really kind of hash out and share resources amongst each other. If you're not familiar with the My NASW member community, so any NASW member can participate in this. It's basically NASW's virtual, it's almost like if Facebook met LinkedIn. There's ways for you to create conversation threads, to share documents with one another, to ask questions across the association. So we have 110,000 plus members across the United States. We have found that this has been a really good way for people to get questions asked or answered from your peers. And we know that there's a lot of conversations happening right now around racial justice, white privilege, how can social workers have better cultural humility, all of these kind of critical things. So the My NASW member community has been a really good place for people to have those conversations openly with each other there. As well as our national office has been hosting a series of Facebook town halls and will continue to do that. There's also been a few statements coming out and resources from the national office, including around excessive force, dismantling systems of oppression, racism within the social work profession. So those are all available on the racial justice page through the national office. And many of them also had gotten emailed out to folks. There's a couple of upcoming events as it relates to this that I want to make sure folks have on their calendar. One is today at 2 o'clock. So if you are free, the national office is going to be having one of their follow-up town halls. This one's going to be specifically on social work and policing reform. We know that there's a whole range of positions that social workers take on this. So we've been having a lot of really hard and important conversations within the field around social work and policing. Do social workers take kind of a collaborative approach? Do we take a full abolition approach? Is there some middle ground area? This town hall is going to continue that conversation. We're excited to see our former board president, Guadalupe Lara, is going to be one of the panelists on that. And that's going to be streamed on the NASW National Facebook page at 2 o'clock. So please feel free to join in on that. You can ask questions, you can interact on that. The second piece that we're really excited about, and we've been working on since, I think this is maybe June when we had our first statewide town hall, is we are launching our Social Justice and Anti-Racism Committee. So this is going to be a Michigan-based social work collaborative group that is going to meet at least monthly at this point to work on issues as it relates to anti-racist practice and initiatives and community organizing work. The first meeting is going to be Wednesday, September 9th at 5:30. So if you are interested in joining in on that, we really are hoping that this is going to be a working group. There's a lot of stuff that we need to do as a profession and as an association. So we want to have that input from our members, the guidance from our members. And so that information is also available on our website. The other two events, one is specifically more related to kind of racial justice work, which is LEAD, October 29th. It's our virtual legislative education and advocacy day. This year, we're theming it around reimagining social work with kind of a two-pronged approach. We're looking at racial justice and political social work. So there's 7 CEs for LEAD. registration is open now. We will have sponsorship and virtual exhibitor space available. So if you're at organizations that are hiring social workers right now, if you want to increase your name recognition, we would love to have you exhibit or sponsor also at that event. And that, like I said, is going to be virtual. It's going to be a 9 to 4:30 on October 29th. The other new initiative that is starting on September 28th, our BSW and our MSW student representatives on our board will be launching a series of student networking sessions this year. We know that campuses are moving virtual, and it's going to be social work education is going to look very different, at least for the first 6 months of the year, likely. So this is going to be a really good opportunity for students all over Michigan to engage with one another and to brainstorm and talk about what's going on and what's needed. So the first one's going to be on the 28th, again at 5:30. We're hoping to also Facebook Live that event. So a couple of ways for people to participate. And that's open to all students. You don't have to not just members.
Dwayne, I just dropped in the chat box for people because I was receiving a few questions about how you sign up for policy updates.
Great.
There's a link and you just fill out your information. And go.
Perfect. Yes. Fantastic. Thanks, Elgeria. The other quick member updates is every region in the state now. So if you aren't aware, Michigan breaks our state into 11 different regions, kind of based off of geography. And as a member, you kind of fall into whatever one your address is in. Every region now has a Facebook page. So if you're not on that already, we invite you to join your regional page. That's a good way to get connected to people specifically in your area, to also share resources. And if there are news stories or things going on that are kind of relevant to social work, that we invite you to participate in that. The national office has helped launch the National Veteran Suicide Prevention Initiative with the Trump administration. So you can find more information about that on the National NASW website, as well as there's a whole bunch of kind of these fringe benefits of membership where it's like car rental discounts. You can get discounts on various services and goods. So they've added a UPS one. So if you're mailing a lot of stuff right now, or if your organization is doing that, you can find some discounts through the NASW national website if you go to member benefits area for that. And then the last two kind of reminders are more based off of questions we've been getting quite a bit lately. And this one I just wanted to put back up because we've been getting some questions, especially from new folks, about how do you list your credentials? What's the right way to do it versus kind of the wrong way? And I'll say most people list their credentials the wrong way most of the time, versus what the state asks folks to. So for the master's level, which is going to be most folks, you should always have your designation listed whenever possible. So whether you have a clinical designation or a macro designation or both, because that legally then tells an employer or the public what you're able to do, what your scope of practice is. So we highly encourage folks to just, when they're updating your business cards or your websites, if you don't have that designation listed, to just make sure you update that. We also have the associate's level RSST, and then the bachelor's, there's no second designation. So it's just the LLBSW or LBSW there. The other question we've been getting quite a lot since the pandemic started is from social workers asking about CEs. And the question is there going to be any flexibility, or is the state going to open up the rules to allow for more online CEs? And so actually right now, social workers, you can earn 100% of your continuing education virtually already. So this is really kind of an important piece to echo across your circles, because live content counts as a live synchronous event. So if you're attending a live webinar, that counts basically as an in-person session. So if you attend our lunch and learns, almost everything that we've been doing since the pandemic started has been live. So that can count, and you can do unlimited amount of those. The only things that you're limited on are what's considered alternative learning, which is pre-recorded webinars. So if there's not a live presenter, if you're looking at something that was recorded a while back, or something like a virtual book club, which we have through NASW Michigan, or if you get home study journals, those would also count as alternative learning. So just being really careful and cautious about where you're getting your CEs, but we know that there is a bit of confusion out there with folks, especially as it relates to online learning. So please feel free to pass this message along to folks in your circles, because we want to make sure that people have the most accurate information in there. Okay, question on clarifying. Yeah, so it looks like Maria. Yep, Maria, that would be correct on your credentials. If it says micro and macro, so that would be incorrect. It would be clinical and macro, Ken, at least in Michigan. And every state has slightly different wording for it. So that's where it gets a little bit confusing, especially if you're licensed across multiple states. So Ohio, for instance, has an LCSW and an LSW. We don't have either of those letters. We have the LMSW-clinical or LMSW-macro or both. And so if you do have multiple licenses across states, your letters after your name may look a bit of a hodgepodge. And we know a lot of social workers have additional credentials as well, so it can get pretty long after there. But we just want to make sure that everybody is following at least what the Michigan guidance is right now. The other thing as it relates to licensing is there are 2 seats going to be opening up on the Board of Social Work. They are accepting recommendations until October 1st. We highly recommend, if you are interested in serving on the Board of Social Work, that you reach out to us at the chapter level first. And we often like to talk to folks through it. We've got we've got a current and a former Board of Social Work member on our call today. So we love to have amazing social workers on that. It's a really important body for our state. And so if you are looking for an additional way to get involved in the profession, that could be a great option, as well as there's lots of other commissions and task force at the state level that are almost always seeking folks. These ones you can see we've had these up for I think a few meetings now, but the Civil Rights Commission, the Michigan Council on Rehab. I know the governor also just has put together a couple, I can't remember if they're called task force or committees, but there's one like a women's council. And then I don't know what the other one is. There's a bunch of stuff that's happening, but you can see that at michigan.gov/appointments if you want more information about those. All right, so those were primarily what we had as updates for folks. Are there questions? Are there resources that you all wanted to share? Things that you're finding in your practice that would be helpful to talk about as a larger group?
I would just, it's Shelley, I would just speak to how much I appreciate these meetings happening like this one today. You know, I feel like I get inundated with emails, and I know that I'm not reading them all in detail. I'm skipping over some things just because I just don't have the time to read through everything. So to sit down for an hour and actually have Algeria's updates about licensing, et cetera, I find it very helpful, and I wish more people were participating. I know I'm going to say something to a lot of the folks that I see from time to time and encourage them to take part when they can. So I just really appreciate that NASW is doing this.
Thanks, Shelley. And I know personally, I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and it seems like the pandemic just has opened up that flexibility. And I think people are much more just used to being on a Zoom call now than maybe they were 4 months ago. And so I found it pretty helpful for us because there is a lot of moving parts in social work, right? One of the things that we didn't even talk about today is that there are going to be some new rules changes happening to the social work general rules. That we had our public comment period, I think that was in June. It's already been a while. So probably by the end of this year, there's going to be some changes some of them are fairly significant that will be happening that impact all licensed folks. And so when those happens, we definitely want to make sure everybody is on board with that, because part of what we're hearing around folks is not knowing about what CEs, what online CEs that they're able to take. We get questions about the human trafficking requirement quite a lot still too. Is like those rules went into effect over 3 years ago now. So we want to make sure that that education is continual, that people have the most accurate information about the field, because there are some things that are brand new that are happening every month, but then there are some things that are just continually, there's those questions that linger out there in social work. And I know you're a former Board of Social Work member, so you got those questions a lot, I'm sure. But I was just going to show what the MyNASW community looks like through the national. So if you go to your socialworkers.org and you log in, if you go to all communities here, you'll see as this loads up, some states have specific chapter ones. We do not in Michigan. So most of it's going to be on the all member forum, and you can look by. So the library is when people post specific documents to share. You can see that there has 108,000 people that have participated in that forum at some point. And then you can look at discussions by thread. So retirement for social workers, supervision, suicide prevention, CEs, medical social work documentation, face-to-face therapy, test prep courses, all of those hot topic social work things, call out culture and cancel culture. There's 319 comments on that one, right? That's a big topic right now. Police, white social workers looking to become more anti-racist, some really good stuff. And then people can share stuff within those communities there. So if you're looking for another way to get connected to social workers everywhere, this is a really good one. And it doesn't require that you have social media. So if you're not a Facebook person, if you're not a Twitter or Instagram person, this is an easy one that's included in your membership already. Let's see, I think there might have been a question that came through. Oh, Maria uses it, great. Yeah, it's hard to keep track of all the emails. Yes, yeah, there's a ton of stuff. And I know when COVID was first started, we sent out a lot of pieces. So I apologize for that. But we know that you all wanted to be up to date on everything. And there's so many moving parts right now. We have at least 4 fairly large issues going on nationally, whether it's the pandemic, the election, the racial justice climate, and the economic issues. And so it's really important that we stay up to date and connected as a community with social workers. So, we're going to continue to have this call at the 4th Friday of every month. We'll have our clinical support group on the 1st and 3rd Friday. Miriam, again, so to access the MyNASW community, if you go to socialworkers.org, this will be what the homepage looks like. Right here at MyNASW, you'll click there. And then you can click either, there's 2 primary options, the Visit MyNASW community or Update Your Profile. If you go to Visit the MyNASW community, it'll bring up what I just clicked on before. The other option is Update Your Profile. So this is also a good one for people, just as a reminder. If you need to update your email or your address, or if you move to a different state, that's how you would do that here. You would just go in and you would change any of your contact information, your communication preferences. So this is a really good one to just go in and check which emails basically do you get from NASW. Do you get all of them? You can opt out of some things if you don't think you want to get all of the emails that come through the association. The other thing that's listed at the bottom is Social Work Smart Brief. I highly recommend that folks click on this. It's a really good roundup. Basically what it is somebody, this entity, Smart Brief, does a complete internet search every day about what news is impactful to social work or mentions social work. And then you can choose how often you get it, and then you can also tailor it, like if you only want social work news, if you want more career focused news, but you can sign up for those right there. Through there, you can also download your membership certificate. So every year when you renew, you'll get an updated one that you can download if you want to print it and hang it up. If you've lost your membership card, that's also here, and your member packet, which includes some additional things there. So that's a good, easy way to kind of just keep yourself updated throughout the association. Let's see, and it'll also tell you your renewal dates and all of that sort of stuff. Any other questions or things to talk about or share?
I'll say just one thing, as it's not necessarily related to our state. We know that Texas and Louisiana, you know, and our folks down south are facing a huge hurricane. So we know many social workers may be called to do disaster relief, or healthcare professionals in general. So just thinking of them as we are still going through this pandemic. It's a lot going on in the world right now, but social workers are there and ready, and just keep them in your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Algeria. If we do hear from any of those chapters around the Gulf that they are looking for volunteers for folks, we know that many Michigan social workers do disaster relief work. We've hosted some trainings in the past. And if that is something that is interesting or of interest to you, we will post those on our social media as soon as we get them, and then we'll email them out in the next update that we can for that. The other question we have also gotten quite a bit. I was on Wayne State University had their orientation yesterday, and so I talked to some of their incoming students. And what I found was really fascinating and kind of fantastic as a macro social worker is there was a lot of really good questions around, can I be political as a social worker? What do I need to make sure that I'm doing with my social media, right? Can I go to protests? And if I get arrested, how may that impact my professional career, right? That's a question we've been getting more and more regularly as there's been protesting happening continually over, well, the last 3.5 years. And so we want to make sure that social workers know that we support your advocacy. We want you to be advocating across whatever issue is important to you. As it relates to your license, you know, if you get a charge filed against you, you would have to report that. And depending on what it is, that's when the Board of Social Work would take a look at that particular case. In my experience, since I've been at NASW, there's never been somebody who has had a sanction placed against their license because of political organizing or advocacy. Not to say that that potentially couldn't happen depending on if you got charged with a felony or something. But likely if it's just something related to, you know, you had a peaceful protest and you got arrested, I would imagine that there probably would not be any severe issues that would happen to your license. And we've heard a couple cases of social workers getting arrested across the country. The other thing that I wanted to make sure that folks know as it relates to that is NASW has a national ethics and legal hotline for members. So if you find yourself in a legal situation, I highly recommend that you reach out to our legal services. It's called the Legal Defense Fund at the national office, and they can help guide you there. It's often good to also talk to your liability insurance around that because political organizing is in our code of ethics. So we as an organization want to support our members as best as possible if you are doing that work. But we know that there comes with some asterisks depending on what sort of practice you're in, and you have to be a little bit more cautious. So very good though that students are asking that on day one of their orientation. I think it's showing that we've got a different focus of what social work might look like coming in to our programs, which is very exciting.
Dwayne, it's Shelley again.
Yes,
I have to laugh at the idea that a social worker would be arrested or have a license violation for doing the very things that are right in our code of ethics, you know, advocacy. So I'm picturing, what would a social worker who's out protesting, what could possibly cause them to have that license be in jeopardy? And it would be because they're breaking some other kind of law, like they've rammed people with their car or they've looted a building or something else. Peaceful protesting is not, you know, I suppose you could get arrested for that. I was arrested for a sit-in back in the 60s or the early 70s. But, you know, those they just get dropped. I mean, you haven't done anything illegal. So, you know, I have to say, as long as a social worker isn't doing anything that crosses a law, you know, you might want to make sure that you know, aren't part of the problems around the protests, and that you're just doing the peaceful advocacy that we're required to do, or you know, asked to do as part of our charge as social workers.
I'll speak to that a
That's
little
it.
bit. I know what we've seen in other states, and I'm not sure if it has happened here in Michigan. I would not be surprised if it did, just because of a lot of the violence we've seen in especially Southwest Detroit as it relates to protesters. But we've seen protesters, especially people of color, Black protesters who have been peacefully protesting, right? But because of the nature and militarization of some of the police in those cities, situations have escalated, and social workers and people of color and non-people of color are being arrested. And so I think there are situations where it can happen, even if social workers are there doing the right thing, right? And I think right now we're just in times that are really tricky and difficult, especially for social workers of color and those who are allies trying to be there in support of some of these causes and issues around police violence.
I appreciate that comment, Algeria, but there's a difference between being arrested and then being convicted of something. And being arrested, like I say, I can't even tell you how many times I got picked up, booked for sit-ins, etc. Back in the early 70s. And, you know, but there was never a conviction. And it's the conviction that could then threaten a person's license. Just being arrested, you know, you're innocent until proven guilty, or at least that's what the law says. But I believe that the way the licensing board would look at that is to look at, was there a conviction, and then what is it for? And in my experience on the board, on the few things that we had, the few cases that came to us, typically were about things like drunk driving or assault charges. And even then, we looked at those to see whether that meant that that person would actually lose their license or something less. So, you know, from my perspective, in Michigan, and the experience I've had with the licensing board, is that protesting, as long as you're not doing some other, I'd call more heinous kind of crime, probably isn't going to be a loss of license. It, you know, you may end up with something else if you've done something. But I just don't, I would not want any social worker out there to think that they can't speak their mind, speak their truth, advocate for the things that are important to them, and worry. I mean, the worst that might happen is that they may lose some customer or client who doesn't agree with them. But I personally think it's important for social workers, if they feel something's important to them, is that they, you know, also let people see who they are and what that does mean to them. I think part of our job is to help educate people as well. And if you have somebody in your purview who needs help understanding something, you know, some principle or value, I think that it's important to share that part of your personal self. And, you know, you may find out that you disagree with yourself at some point. But, you know, to go back to, I think you know, it's tragic that we have to put up with some of the stuff that we're putting up with at this time. However, not I would not want a social worker to worry about their loss of license because they're out there doing their job, basically, or advocating in the way that they need to advocate. Enough of my soapbox.
Yeah, no, thank you, Shelley, for mentioning that. I think what we have seen in other states, and hopefully we don't see that here in Michigan, is that social workers, especially social workers of color who are peacefully protesting, are being arrested, but just because of disproportionate rates in conviction. They have been convicted, right, of some of these things. And we don't always have all of the details, but I think, you know, as a former member of the Board of Social Work, your statements are very helpful for folks. We want to make sure that people are not in fear of potentially losing their license, but we do also know, like, sometimes there are those disproportionate rates of when it comes to issues with the police, for sure. But this is something we're gonna keep following.
Hey, Algeria.
Keep at very heavily. Yes, is that Dawn?
Yeah, this is Dawn.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I just have a question too, and I'm wondering if the Michigan arm of the NSW is going to address this, because as a white woman, and also as a woman of a biracial child, and as a woman who's not a registered Republican or Democrat, and as a woman who really goes by policy, and I believe everything that has been stated, and I support Black Lives Matters, and there's a lot that I support. What about the protection of people, and including license, of people that have a different thought or a different frame of mind and get attacked and badgered and are in fear? They can't even speak out because they have a different opinions, and which is causing a lot of people anxiety. And even just from a simple statement being made, then all of a sudden people are being accusatory of, you're racist, you're this, you're that. How are we going to address that as a chapter, and dealing with clients, because it's okay for people to have different thoughts and opinions, and it's okay for people, and we should be able to have open dialogue without people feeling attacked. And that's one thing that I believe is missing. It seems from both sides, from that everyone is just attacking everyone. And I've had clients, I was on a call yesterday with a group, I was invited to join this group and just talk with them, because their anxiety is so high because they can't even feel as though they can freely speak, because then they're judged, even if they are a Biden supporter or they are a Trump supporter, or they're not supporting either. They just have an opinion. And this is one area I feel has not been touched on by social work, and I feel it is something that we could do better in. And even for myself, how do we go about addressing that?
One thing I can say as it relates to politically or advocacy-wise, legislatively-wise, NASW is a nonpartisan organization, and we support our values and our code of ethics and things of that sort. I think what we have done at Michigan and what our national office is trying to do, especially through our racial justice work group, is just to be more informative and educate people on terms and language and historical contexts and components, and also educate people on the ways in which the profession has incidentally or accidentally perpetuated forms of oppression, right? Just to get folks educated, to create an opportunity for communication and engagement in a different manner. So that's what I can tell you, Dwayne. I don't know if you wanted to add any more to that.
And I do want to say real quick, Algeria, the very first conversation all of you had before the national one, but the Michigan one, I saved the PowerPoint because it was very educational for me, because it delved deep into the systemic racism and things of that nature. And it talked about the unintentional and then the intentional. And I think that just even as clinicians, even though I'm a macro practitioner, I'm still a licensed clinician as well, is that the values and the ethics are to treat people and not, you treat them with value and dignity and respect on all coins and all sides. And Facebook, social media has just turned into horrific. Like I'm like ready to get off it because I even see social workers that are just, we all have, and if we say we haven't, then you must have like angels as friends, because some of the things people say are just horrific. And it's just like, no, that's not how you deal with it, I guess. I don't know. Maybe what I'm saying isn't coming across clear, but I just think that we can do better as individuals. I think we can do better of getting our message across as individuals, but also being inclusive of everyone, whether they agree or disagree, doesn't mean we have to be so negative.
Yeah, Melissa, or Dawn, sorry, I can take on that a little bit more too. So I think part of what we're hoping will come out of our social justice and anti-racism committee is exactly this sort of thing, whether it's resource development, additional trainings, right, or just open conversation. And I think that's really, the starting point, partially why we've had these statewide calls and conversations in Michigan, because there's not always a lot of opportunity for us to be honest about things. And even on those calls, it's really hard, right? Especially if you have a dissenting opinion on some of this, because social work isn't a monolith. People come to our field and have a whole range of backgrounds, faiths, political ideologies, right? And so while where as a field, we try to frame it, and as an association, we try to always frame it back to the code of ethics. How does this fit within our code of ethics? And then as an association, we have this whole additional policy framework and a policy framework of positions that we rely on kind of to guide our positions. But it's a very tricky, it's super tricky what you're asking, right? We're in such a polarized climate right now that almost being kind and empathetic to folks people are so on edge on everything right now that even
you said it perfectly. You said it perfectly. Yeah. It's like you can't, it's like people are having a hard time being empathetic. That's exactly right. And it's just like, people aren't bad. I truly believe innately, people are not bad people. And that's why I do appreciate the education you all are providing.
And I think that's where social workers can really use their skills, especially their therapeutic skills in these conversations, right? To de-escalate, to open up the forums, to kind of be that mediator in a lot of these conversations when possible, because everything is heated right now. And a lot of it's for good reason, right? We're seeing these hugely and visibly oppressed bodies and groups of people that are literally being shot in the street. Our political climate is like insane, right? It's like people have picked their corner, and it's really hard to like move a little bit to the middle to at least have some open conversation. But I think that's where a lot of times the clinical skills can be really valuable in terms of how do we navigate really difficult conversations. And I know as an association, we struggle with that internally too, because not all of our members agree with everything that we put out or do, and that's expected. But that's also where we want to make sure that you all feel like you can talk to us if you don't agree, because it's not staff that make decisions, it's our membership. That's why we have committees and task force and a board of directors, right? And so we want to make sure that everybody, regardless of their ideology, their political beliefs, have a place within our field. Now, we want to challenge injustice. We want to challenge oppressive thoughts. We want to challenge, social workers that are, I've seen some really openly hostile social workers, and I think it's important to have that call in, call out sort of culture within our field, because we have to be able to provide that honest feedback to one another, but remembering it's coming from a place of caring and love and growth. And so it's all going back to that social work 101 about relationship building. It's like, the people that are in your circle. You know, I know it's really hard not to get into some social media arguments with some of my family members on things sometimes. Probably many of you are in that same boat. But I think we have to, when we can, try to de-escalate, remember where people are coming from. Sometimes it's just about education and storytelling. You know, this is my experience. This is how what you're saying is affecting me. You may not intend it that way. But I think as we continue to have these open conversations, both as social workers and then as broader community, I think that's where we just need to continue to talk to one another as opposed to shutting people down when necessary. Although there are also times where you need to, for your own self-care, put that barrier up, especially when there may be direct hate or racism or whatever coming directly at you. And I know we've seen that in our association. Some of our staff have been directly gotten hate mail in the last several months, and it's not acceptable. And so we have to also then, as an association, staffing within the association, how do you address some of that pieces? And so it's a tough conversation, and I'm hoping that these are the sorts of topics that will come out of that committee that's starting in September. And so then we can figure out really what sort of action is necessary after this.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it is really tough conversations. And it's really sad because you see friendships being ruined, and instead of people speaking out of love and understanding one another and allowing people the opportunity for growth and to learn instead of just shutting them down. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, that's a hot topic to end on today, Dawn. I know.
Dang it all. I'm sorry. I'm going to put it on Shelly. I'm going to put it on Shelly.
But I think as social workers, this is where we have to be able to talk to one another. It's like, these are the things that people are dealing with. There's a lot of struggle happening right now. And as a white person, I can't complain about any of that stuff. I might be stressed with COVID and, all of this other pieces, but like, my life is not directly impacted by this. And I think we also have to recognize the privilege that a lot of us have within the field too. And so I'm hoping that, we can continue to have these conversations, that you all will provide feedback about what you need. If there are good things going on in the community that need to be shared, please pass those on to your regional board members, right? They're also looking for folks who are willing to do training. So if you know people who are really good at having these sort of conversations and facilitating these conversations, that would also be really helpful for us as we put on future town halls. Oh, it looks like there was one other question from Ken. Let me go find it, Ken, really quick. When, if at all, should one change their license status from active to retired inactive? Good question. So what I have found at my time at NASW is social workers very rarely actually retire. There's always there's an afterlife to your social work career, whether it's volunteering or maybe you're doing a passion project. I have found that most people like to keep their license for as long as possible because the continuing education requirements aren't super strict. So it can be helpful just to have that in case something pops up that is really of interest to you, or if you want to continue to do like supervision for somebody in the retirement phase, or sit on a board of directors or something like that, where it might be helpful to continue to have that license active. Because depending on how long your license is lapsed, there are different steps to get it reinstated. So if it's less than 3 years, it's pretty easy. You just have to get your continuing education and pay the fee. If it's like 3 to 7, you also then have to add in, I believe it's your supervision at that point. And then if it's over 7 years, then you also have to take the exam again. So you want to be a little bit cautious in terms of like, what does retirement mean? Now, if you're like retiring and then going and move to Hawaii and just like chilling out on the beach and that's going to be your life, which I hope that's your life, like, you're probably fine. But if you think there's an active after social work career, then I recommend for folks to keep their license. If you're doing clinical practices, there's a lot of other factors that you want to start to think about as you get near retirement. And even if you're not near retirement, things like having a professional will, you know, that's something that a lot of folks don't think about, but like what happens if you pass away, right? A lot of times all of your paperwork then goes, if you don't have, an office, it goes to your family. And we get calls from families a lot of times who are like, what do I do with all these records? And you don't want to necessarily burden those folks. And so NASW has resources on that. But specifically as it relates to licensing, I say keep it if you can. You know, you can get most of your CEs, if not all your CEs, for free through NASW. I don't know if anybody else on the phone has other thoughts on that. Move to Hawaii. That's my suggestion.
My only thought is you keep your options open.
Yeah.
None of us know what's going to happen tomorrow, and a person who thinks they're going to retire may find out that, you know, now their retirement savings is gone and they have to go back to work. So I'd say keep your options open. And, you know, even if you move to another state, it may benefit you to have a license in any state to then meet that other state's requirements to get licensed there. So, and off the top of my head, I can't tell you what Hawaii's licensing requirements are, but Michigan license will probably help you at least get started.
Yeah, and Michigan has one of the more easy licenses to travel with. Our process is a little bit more complex. Yeah. All right. Well, I know we're over our time for today, but thank you all for great conversation. I hope you'll join us today at 2 with the national office for our town hall on policing reform. And I hope everyone has a good weekend. All right. Thanks, everyone.